Hello and good morning, everybody. We're doing this online today until the 16th of January. We're so close to Christmas. I wanted to do something special. If we had been in class, we would have been having some treats, maybe Christmas cookies and Christmas soda, and you would have been completely different. But today you got a Santa hat, and we're going to do the best that we can with what we have. So in my background, you see that I have the page for interactions. We haven't really covered so much of the book yet, but we have done chapters 1 and we're now in the process of completing chapter 2. We've talked about communication and culture. I have included in your program a series of interviews with people from different countries, and we have discussed the perspectives of these different countries as they relate to various issues, but one thing in common: English. So we had an interview with somebody from the United States, Jocelyn Pennywell Trim. So she gave you the perspective of the United States, English as a first language. We also had somebody from Canada, Janice McGregor, Miss World 2020, was here with us, online of course. We had somebody from the Philippines who talked about English as a foreign language, which I thought was a brilliant way for you to have an interaction with someone where you could use your English as a foreign language with someone. All of that ties together really well with communication and culture. And I'm really happy that you've been able to experience that. You have the opportunity to revisit some of these aspects in a Quizlet study set that I created for you. I included some questions about Zimbabwe as well, as you had the opportunity to watch an interview with Ms. World Classic Constance Selden, who is from Zimbabwe and who gave you a perspective of that country that has English as one of the many languages in that country. So there will be some questions about that and some terms that you have learned in the Quizlet study set. So all of this goes with the chapter Communication and Culture. Last class you did a PSA, and I would like you to type in chat right now what PSA stands for. PSA. What does PSA stand for? There is a bit of a delay between my being on video and what you watch at home, but I'm there in the chat typing something to you as I speak, although there is a delay. That's the reason why I prefer to use this platform. Whenever I'm not doing a Teams or a Skype with you, I'm doing this platform here where we are, because it gives us more opportunities. PSA, those of you who wrote public service announcement, you are correct. So you did a PSA last class, and that PSA was really good. You taught people about Norway and culture shock. You were actually telling people certain things, perhaps to alleviate the consequences of a culture shock. What is a culture shock? Can you write it in just a very concise statement what culture shock is? You have some definitions of what culture shock is on your book, of course, but you don't have to define it exactly with those words. You can give your own flavor to it and explain it in your own words. I really liked some of the stories that you told in the classroom about your experiences with culture shock when you had been visiting different countries. So now that we have discussed a little bit of this regarding culture shock, which is one of the key concepts from this chapter, those of you who don't have the book with you, I took pictures of the pages. If you let me know, I will send you the page. I'll send you the page. Or sometimes it's kind of hard to take a good picture of the page, and I don't have a scanner. And I know people say, hey, you can scan it with your phone. I know, but I haven't managed to do that yet, to get it working. I love technology, but sometimes it doesn't work exactly the way that I wish it would, like instantly. So let's go into our book, page, what appears to be 75. I should put glasses on, but I'm not going to. Page 75, it says, be perspectives. In other people's shoes. We've done a lot of work regarding this, and I'm really happy with your progress in this department. We're going to start with some of the audio for this. So I'm going to remove myself. And make sure that I play the audio for you and that's loud enough that everyone can hear. One of the things that I like to tell my students, every single time that you do an audio exercise in one of my classes, I want you to listen and I want to make sure that you pay attention to what you're listening to. Look at the words. Look at the words as you listen, because there is no better way. There really isn't a better way for you to become a better speller. Because a lot of times you will know a word and you'll be like, oh, I know that word. How do you spell that? But if you listen and look at the words, you'll always know how it's spelled. All right. I will play this audio for you in parts. I will stop to come back to the video and ask questions. In total, it will be about 9 minutes of your lives.
Changing perspectives. Ethnocentrism. It is only natural to see things our own way. We all have different family backgrounds, upbringings, and personalities. So it is no surprise that we end up with different perspectives on things. The problems arise when we judge other people based solely on our own perspective. Imagine, for example, that you are somewhere in Norway and you ask a passerby for directions. If the directions turn out to be wrong, then you are likely to draw the conclusion that your informant was either ignorant or a liar. If the same thing happened in Thailand, then the explanation could be quite different. Your informant was simply being polite and wanted to oblige you, even if he or she was not quite sure of the way. It is vital, then, to be
So here's where I come in. They gave two examples. Let me go back to the video. They gave two examples. Can you please type in chat the two countries that were mentioned in these examples? They mentioned two countries. Just type real fast. Really fast. One of them was Norway, the other one was Thailand. In which of these countries does the text refer to the informant as a liar or somebody who was ignorant? If you said to the first question, Norway and Thailand, you're right. And if you said Norway to the other question I asked, you're also right. So now you can go to the next page. I'll stop and ask some questions about that as well. Let me remove myself.
Able to see our own perspective as one of many possible perspectives. If we are too self-centered, this is likely to affect how other people perceive us. This self-centeredness can take the form of both egocentrism and ethnocentrism. Whereas egocentrism puts yourself at the center, ethnocentrism means to put your own group of people at the center. Egocentric people easily offend others because they do not seem to understand that there are any other perspectives than their own. Ethnocentric people can have the same effect on others, but ethnocentrism is probably easier to cure. The root of ethnocentrism is that we tend to interpret what we see and hear from our own perspective in life. There are good reasons for that. Our upbringing teaches us particular ways of doing things and thinking. This will inevitably give us an idea of what is normal and appropriate. At the same time, as we grow up, we learn to adjust to how different people behave. We develop other ways of communicating with friends than with parents, and we relate differently to different people. This is all good. However, as we get older, we may start dividing people into groups, the ones we can identify with, and the rest. There is nothing wrong with a sense of belonging and identity. It is only natural to care more about family and friends than others, to root for your local handball team, and to hope Norway wins the Eurovision Song Contest, even if you know the Swedish song is best. Ethnocentrism is not about being proud of who you are. Rather, it is about relying exclusively on your own upbringing and perspective to judge other people. If someone arrives late for an appointment and presents a lame excuse, we might interpret it as rudeness. However, in many societies, such a white lie may be a form of politeness to spare everyone the embarrassment of hearing that they had forgotten about the whole thing. Less obvious examples of ethnocentrism take place in every workplace and every classroom. Those who think or behave differently from the dominant group may easily be looked upon as strange or less valuable.
All right. So we talked a little bit about ethnocentrism and egocentrism last class, I believe. We didn't go deeply into these concepts, but we talked a little bit about them. And what I want to discuss with you now is, was it clear to you what the difference was? Was it clear to you what the difference between egocentrism and ethnocentrism? You can go and look at these things from the perspective of the words and what you know parts of the words to mean. For example, ego. Please type in chat the the first thing you think of when you think of the word ego? Those of you who wrote something to do with the self-absorption, or anything that had to do with focusing on oneself and your own perspective on things, just you, like you're the center of everything, egocentrism. Now, how about ethnocentrism? If you break the word into bits, so you think of, tell me what you think of. Type in chat really quickly so that I can see. If you wrote something about ethnicity, you're completely right. Because ethnocentrism, you have ethnic, and then centrism, center, middle, which were things that we discussed in class, and I believe one of you said it brilliantly, even without reading the definition, what this really was. So let's keep going. I have one more question. It is about a term that is in the text, a white lie. Please type your definition of a white lie. How does a white lie differ from a really bad lie? Because a white lie is supposedly not as bad as a real lie. How so? Please type it. A white lie. If you say something to diminish the effects of what you were actually trying to say, or if you just omit some terms, or if you put a different color on a statement, that's a white lie. Now, let's continue. We have about 5 minutes left of this. Please make sure that you look at the words as you listen. It's very important.
Decentering. The process of becoming less ethnocentric can be a long one, but the key is to learn more about other people. Who are they, and what are their backgrounds? The aim is to understand other perspectives on life than our own ethnocentric view, which includes other ways of doing things and other ways of thinking. When we try to see ourselves from the outside and focus on other people's perspectives, we call it decentering. It involves seeing that there are many ways of doing things and many ways of thinking. Although it may sometimes be necessary to change particular ways of thinking, for example, when they represent a threat to democracy or equality or the environment, we should always try to understand other points of view and other perspectives on life in order to communicate in a constructive way. Empathy. To be able to decenter, we need to develop empathy, the ability to change perspectives and put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. Some form of empathy can be used in any encounter with other people. Even if we can never know exactly how it is to be someone else, we can still try to understand another person's position. Empathy is more than just sympathy. If a friend has lost a grandmother, we can feel sympathy by thinking about our own grandmother. But that does not necessarily tell us anything about how our friend is feeling. Empathy requires knowledge about our friend and the relationship between our friend and his or her grandmother. For example, do they love each other dearly? Or do they hardly know each other? With more background knowledge and the ability to change perspectives, we will be more able to understand our friends' reactions.
So now I have some questions about this. So we talked about two aspects here, decentering and empathy. One of the things that we discussed in class was the difference between empathy and sympathy. And you all showed a very good understanding of what those things are. Here we have an explanation of empathy relating to how well you know a person in the situation they're going through. And also when they talked about decentering, I want you to tell me in a very concise, quick way, don't need to give too many details. I want you to give me a definition of decentering and a definition of empathy. The book offers an explanation about the process of becoming less ethnocentric. The description on the book is that it can be a long process because it is so deeply rooted in who you are. There are certain things about your culture, and we have discussed this at length. And those of you who did the PSA, which was really wonderful, by the way, you talked about certain aspects of Norwegian culture that are very commonplace to you personally, but that can be kind of difficult for others. Having that knowledge helps you understand, helps you put yourself in other people's shoes, which is basically one of the main aspects of this chapter in interactions. But the book does say it is a long process. Empathy, it is a quality that certain people have. Would you say it is a positive thing, or would you say it's negative? Please type in chat. I myself believe it to be something very positive. It all depends on where you're coming from. Some people think that if you're too empathetic, that you will suffer a lot in life because you're constantly empathizing with others. So you have empathy, which is the noun, and you have to empathize, which is the verb. And then you have the adverb, which is, please type in chat what you have the verb to empathize, empathy, the noun, substantive, the noun, and then you have the adverb. Remember those words? Normal, adjective, normally, adverb, and then to normalize, the verb. I want you to always know these categories of words for when you're writing. It happens very often with Norwegian students who have a tendency not to see the difference between an adverb and an adjective because so many words in Norwegian are both adverb and adjective. I'll give you an example. The word absolute, that word is both an adjective and an adverb in Norwegian. But then in English, you have absolutely, which is the adverb. and then you have that is an absolute truth, which is a bit of a pleonastic form, but I'll use it as an example anyway. This is an absolute truth. Absolute in this context here, den är sammanhangen. Absolute is an adjective, and absolutely, if you say she's absolutely right, that's an adverb. But I digress. I want to move forward because I promised this was not going to be, I wasn't going to sit here and talk for 90 minutes, and I won't. Because you have complained enough about long lectures and things like that. And when I say you, I mean my students in general. They complain if the lectures are long. So I'll try to keep this brief. I love talking, so I could probably be on here forever and not notice. We're going to move it along to the next point, cultural empathy. We've talked about empathy, to empathize with someone. What does that mean? Now, how do you empathize with someone in a cultural way? This is the next part, and we're almost done. A little bit over 4 minutes left. Just 4 minutes of your lives.
Cultural empathy. We may think that our communication styles and ways of thinking are unique to us as individuals, but they are also influenced by the society we live in. To put it another way, our communication styles and ways of thinking are also culturally determined. We can see this clearly in the way people in different societies and groups of people relate to time. How late is too late, for example, or to admitting to mistakes. In Norway, for example, the media will always expect politicians and others to admit even the tiniest mistake, and will readily forgive them if they have been honest. In other societies, admitting mistakes may be seen as a sign of weakness or indecisiveness. By studying other societies, we develop cultural empathy. That is, the ability to understand the cultural background of other people and see things from the perspective of another society. Take people in Australia, for example. If we know something about how and when the country was settled, if we know a little about the demography of the country, vibrant, modern cities, and the huge, sparsely populated outback, and their role as a major power in the Pacific region, then we have a better chance of seeing how the world looks from an Australian perspective. The deeper our understanding of another society, the less one-dimensional our view of it becomes. This does not mean that we automatically become well prepared to understand and communicate with any Australian we happen to meet, but it is a very good starting point.
This semester, you also had the opportunity to watch an interview with somebody from Australia. In that interview that I did a few months ago, you were able to hear a little bit about that country from the perspective of a real person who is from there and lives there. You could hear the accent, which was not put on. It was a real person talking the way that they actually talk. This is the importance of the interviews. And this is clearly something that I've developed to make your classes better and more real, although the book Interactions provides you with listening files, and the actors, the voice actors that they have are really good. But having a real person is also a really good way to see that cultural perspective. So when you had that interview with Paul Tonner, the podcaster from Australia. He talked about things from his perspective. And what the book says here about cultural empathy is that knowledge that you have of the country will help you reach that cultural empathy, although it won't make you an expert. Now I'm going to ask a few questions about Australia to see how tuned you are with these things and if you remember. In that interview, you learned about some mountains in New South Wales. New South Wales is one of the states in Australia. I want you to write down the name of the mountains. If you remember. If you don't remember, I'll blow straight past it. The Blue Mountains. And in that interview, you also learned why they're called the Blue Mountains. Some of you may have had a little bit of fear, or maybe a lot of fear, of going to Australia because of certain aspects of its fauna. Fauna as in F-A-U-N-A, all the animals, the wildlife. And that's one of the things that I asked the podcaster who was interviewed for this purpose to talk about, the fauna. And specifically, one thing that one of you talked about, I think it was snakes in the toilet, which some people have a true fear of, which I've also seen on TikTok. Anyway, so having this knowledge of the country, even if you're not an expert, that will help you reach a level of cultural empathy. This is what the purpose of those interviews really has been from the beginning, to tie it together with what you're learning on the book Interactions. Now we're 2 minutes away from finishing the text, and we're going to do a Quizlet Live. So please pick up your phones and have them ready, because we're going to do a Quizlet Live, and after that I'll give you, I don't want to give you too many things to do, but I'll give you something short for you to do. So we're going to finish listening to this, and then we're going to do a Quizlet Live, and then everybody is free to, I guess you still have a class after this, so I don't want to create any expectations. So let's get this show going. 2 more minutes and the text is finished. 2 more minutes of your lives.
Intercultural Encounters. Fortunately, there is no need to go abroad to experience diversity, since culture can refer to any group of people, from families to civilizations, that have developed shared ways of behaving and thinking. We all encounter new cultures quite often. Just going to a friend's house for dinner can involve an encounter with different communication styles, ways of doing things, and ways of thinking. If crossing a threshold involves an intercultural encounter, then crossing national borders will usually mean encountering several new cultures at the same time. Norwegians moving abroad, or foreigners moving to Norway, will often be faced with a new school environment, a new neighborhood, and new cultural traditions. If we add to this the necessity of learning a new language, the sum of new experiences can easily lead to strain, or even so-called culture shock. But more importantly, studying intercultural encounters in texts and in real life is both rewarding and the best way of developing intercultural competence. All kinds of cultural encounters can be used for reflection and intercultural learning. Here are some points that can guide such work. Describe the situation. Describe what each of the persons involved says, and does? What seem to be the expectations of the people involved in the situation? What seems to be the misunderstanding or tension in this situation? How would you describe the actions of the people involved based on your own background and from your own perspective? Take the perspective of each of the persons involved and try to describe the situation from their point of view. How might they reason in this situation, and why do you think they communicate as they do? Can you relate this incident to anything you have experienced yourself? What have you learned from this, and how can you apply your understanding of this incident to other situations?
Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask of you. Not too much, because I promised I wasn't going to do too much, but I do want to make sure that we do go through the different aspects of the text. Very simple, straightforward question. According to the text, can you have intercultural experiences without leaving your country? Yes or no? Yes, you can. According to this text, even going to a friend's house, you will encounter a different set of values. And they also talked about Norwegians leaving the country to live abroad, people coming to Norway and experiencing Norway. Okay, so here's what I'm going to give you an option of doing. You can choose to do the questions on page 79, or you can choose to do the questions on page 76. You have a choice of doing it in an audio recording, or you can do it written. If you do it written, send it to me via email. If you do it in an audio file, if it's short enough, that is like a minute, then you can send it to me on Messenger. If it's longer than that, you might have to send it to me in a different manner, either through a link on an email, or you can compact the file, as long as you do it. Now we can do this and go to Quizlet Live. Don't pay any attention to the code that's given on here, for the simple matter that this is happening with delay, so you're not going to be seeing it in the same, you're going to be seeing a different code. This one is just to illustrate what we're doing. So what we're doing is a different type of Quizlet Live. Those of you who are my students in Spanish, you're used to translations. You're very used to that. We're not doing translations. We're doing definitions, which means there are larger portions of text for you to read in order to answer the questions. So it won't be as quick as it normally is, but it's perfectly doable and easy enough that everyone, so don't pay any attention to this code. Use the code that I'm putting in the chat box instead. This is just a mock-up game for the website. All right, everyone. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. We will soon be able to have classes at school again. It won't always be this way. So I hope everyone has a great day.